Welcome, everybody. It is I, Sarah Seidelman, and you are here for a hummingbird interview series moment. And I have with me today Nicole Lance, who is a fantastic life coach and somebody who I got to know. She and I trained at the same institute, Martha Beck's Wayfinding Coach Institute, which we both, I think, highly recommend. And she's also a writer, and Nicole has her first book out this year, and it's called Awesome on Your Own Terms. And it's a fabulous book for those of you who want to live a complete, like overhaul your personal and professional life in 2023, this could be your guide. I mean, she takes you through, I think it's 10 strategies. And if you grab a notebook or a Google Doc and start taking yourself through these things, your life will change if you show up. So we're going to be talking about the book. So welcome, Nicole. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm super excited to talk about it. This is actually my first official published author book interview. So I'm feeling very, very fancy and very accomplished today. Thank you.
You should feel fancy and accomplished. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your story and why this book came to be, Awesome on Your Own Terms. Stop shoulding and start succeeding. And I know for myself that shoulding, like that was the turning point for my sort of midlife career. I don't want to call it a crisis, transformational moment was when I realized I could not should on myself anymore. But tell us about your journey.
Yeah, well, that's fairly similar in terms of kind of where even the title came from, like the stop shoulding yourself part of it. So the book came originally from my career transition from a long time in local government, very stable, not easy, but very stable kind of career path working towards. There's a very predictable kind of next set of steps. And throughout the years, as I kind of like developed my own career, my own sort of like, people who I knew, my network, people that kind of had seen me in different places, there seemed to be like 7 or 8 pieces of advice that I always gave when I started to mentor people. And so whether they were transitioning or whether they were new in the profession, it started to be like the 7 or 8 that kind of like I kept repeating and kept repeating. So fast forward about 13 years, and I was like, I should write these down. Like this would make a cool book someday, far in the future. Someday when I retire, 20 years from now. And so I wrote them down. And then lo and behold, life had a little bit of lifeiness, as it sometimes does. And I ended up actually leaving my career in local government and decided to strike out on my own as an entrepreneur with a 4-month-old at home, because what better time to upend your stable, well-paid job with a pension that, you can't find anymore to do that than with a 4-month-old at home. And it actually became those 8 strategies became one of the first sets of webinars I ever did. And so I broke them up into a couple of segments and I offered it as a webinar series, and actually had recorded them and sort of, didn't have any clue about what I was doing as an entrepreneur and a consultant and online. And this is pre-COVID. So like virtual anything is still kind of a novelty and, not something we're exhausted by at that point. And as I kind of have grown in my journey as an entrepreneur, that's where I started adding some of the other strategies, because I started to notice, similar to you, about this kind of pivotal point that, part crisis, part evolution, kind of all of the above. Really, those strategies were what I was leaning on to make this really significant shift in my world. And I thought, you know what? If these worked for me, chances are they're probably going to work for some other people. So that's kind of where the set of strategies in the book came from.
I love it. And there's one line in the book where you say, hope is not a strategy. And I think a lot of us, before we do make radical changes in our lives, we're sort of in that hope place, like, geez, I hope things get better. Geez, I hope I turn the corner and I find my job more interesting once again, spontaneously by some miraculous thing, or, but then when it doesn't, it's like, yeah, hope is not necessarily a strategy, but you give all these wonderful, like actionable ideas, which is, I'm all about that. I feel like that's where, unless you're in grief, if you're in grief, forget the action, right? We know, right. Yes. Take it easy. And I know one of the ways that you knew that things were going to change for you was your footwear. You mentioned that in the book, and I thought that was fascinating because I think for those of you who are listening, like if you're noticing a change in your like style of your hair, you like, I can't do this hair anymore. I'm sick of like curling it every day, or I'm sick of flat ironing it, or whatever you're doing. And I want to change, like, or you're suddenly drawn to some new outfit. Like, tell us about the footwear situation.
Yeah, that was one of those things that just sort of happened at the time. And I didn't, like so many of these things, you don't necessarily mark it as pivotal when it
Right.
occurs, but you look back later and you're like, oh, that was the first domino in the kind of thing. So this was probably, I mean, gosh, almost a decade ago now. I was working in local government for a large community. I'm based out of Phoenix, Arizona right now. So here in Arizona, large community, and dressed up in the suits and I had already ditched the pantyhose. Those didn't last very long, like thank God. Um, but the thing that I did is I came home one day and I was like, I am never wearing high heels again.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. I don't, I love the way they look. I think other people rock them and look amazing. But for me, I was like, makes my back hurt, my feet hurt, then I'm crabby. And the building we were in at the time had stairs. And so I was up and down the stairs all day in high heels. And I was just like, you know what? I don't know necessarily what caused like that specific day to be like the plant my flag day, but I went through my closet and I put all of my high heels, except for the ones that I wore at my wedding, into donation bags and
Wow.
stuck them in the garage. And literally went to the store, went shopping, bought 2 pairs of flats to wear to work. And that was the last
And
thing.
I remember you mentioned Converse tennis shoes because in all your promo photos, I love it because you've got Converse on and it's like
Yeah.
a
So
big leap.
that's probably part of like what precipitated the event. So in the place where I was working at that time, we were working 410. So we would go into work at 7. But on Thursday evenings, we would have city council meetings, and the council meetings didn't start until 7 p.m. So you would go to work in the morning and you would know now we've got this evening meeting that starts at 7. And technically it's on the last day of the work week because it's Monday through Thursday. Um, and in order to save my feet so that I could wear the high heels at night at the meeting, I started to wear Converse with my like business suits or my skirts. And it started off originally, there was like an all black pair, so it would blend with my pants and nobody might like actually notice. And then I started to get like a little, well, maybe if I match the color to the skirt or the top or the blazer. And then for some reason, it got to be like kind of a novelty thing, like, oh, Nicole, what color Converse do you have on today? And I realized like inadvertently, I hit on this perfect, like corporate, semi-corporate uniform that I could, in that context, kind of get away with. But it took me a little while until I realized how much more comfortable I was walking around and how much more focused I could be on work because I wasn't trying to put on this other, like for me, footwear that literally just didn't feel good anymore. Um, until I had that experience, that was kind of the thing that gave me the courage to change it. And the backlash against it was so odd to me. I mean, people were like, the first day I came in flats, they were like, I got pulled into someone's office. Like, are you pregnant? And I'm like,
Oh my God.
no.
Which isn't that an illegal question to ask
Well,
somebody?
yeah, highly, and I was like, why are you clueless? Why are you asking me? And they were like, well, you're not wearing heels, you're wearing flats. And I was like, since when did that become a predictor of anyway?
Pregnancy.
Yeah, but literally it was surprising to me. And once I hit on the fact that it was disruptive for some people, I was like, it's sort of what introduced the idea of a permission slip early on, which is one of the strategies in the book, is writing yourself a permission slip. Because I realized if I could show them, you could do this too. We don't all have to walk around in these things that make our feet feel horrible. It like kind of became a conversation opener and sort of a way to talk about, could we make this thing, meaning the workplace that we're in or this conference that we're going to, a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more like, could it just feel better. And so
And more
years,
fun too with the color, it seems like. Sorry
yeah,
to make.
and it's like, then it morphed over the years now into like a uniform. So when I speak at conferences or facilitate, I think I'm up to like 14 pairs of Converse and Vans. I've now expanded to Vans
I love it.
that match 14 different colors of jackets. And so it's just sort of a way, I think, for me to show up and inadvertently give a little bit more permission for people to challenge some of the things that they're taking maybe for granted.
Yeah, and be yourself. It seems. What so it is the beginning of the new year. It is 2023 now. And I know a lot of us, it's that time of year where we think about like, yeah, what happened last year and what didn't I accomplish that I wanted to, and what would I like to change? And I was thinking it would be fun to talk about, well, there's so many awesome strategies in this book, but one that is kind of, you mentioned in the book, is cornerstone, sort of foundational, is chapter 1, which is be intentional. And you have a great suggestion in there. And I don't know, I just was wondering if you would talk a little bit about being intentional and what might you suggest for us to do if we want to make 2023 like our best professional and personal year?
Yeah. So be intentional came from the first year that I set sort of a mantra for the coming year and shifted from resolutions, which I had always treated as basically this giant list of things I had been failing at and needed to fix about myself or in my life for the coming year, that always felt heavy and like really like one more thing to add to the list of things I needed to produce. And so the year that I kind of shifted out of that, which is right around, oddly and not so oddly, right around the Converse, kind of shift and away from high heels, was I selected be intentional, because I kind of looked around, and this is one of the ways that I set that sort of mantra or word of the year, phrase of the year, that's going to kind of be a guiding light for kind of how I want to approach the coming months. Is I kind of looked around and I started with what is not working, like what doesn't feel good, what am I dissatisfied with, what do I want to look different in a year from now. And as I kind of looked at it, one of the patterns that popped up for me was not being really intentional. And that's kind of where hope is not a method also came into play. Was, well, gosh, I hope I get recognized at work this year. I hope I have more time with my family. I hope I have better success eating healthy, or whatever, it might be. Then those were all a couple that came up. And so I chose be intentional because I realized in each of those areas, I wasn't proactively scheduling time with my family. I wasn't looking ahead at the calendar and making sure I booked vacation time off. And so I'd get 6 months down the road and be like, oh my gosh, I need a vacation. And then it was hard to schedule, or, timing didn't work out. So that was kind of where I started. And be intentional, although it was a mantra really for a year, has become an underpinning of really how I approach my day to day. So intentional about how does my morning start? Intentional about really honing in and clarifying what do I want to get out of the day. And then being intentional about minimizing that list, because I'll say, well, I want to get this and 9,983 other things out of today. And so really kind of like shifting that down into like a daily or really a moment by moment kind of practice. As that's kind of evolved and moved forward, I've bumped into a couple of different ways of finding kind of a mantra for a year, or sometimes I'll use them for a season. Where there was a period of time in like the middle of 2022 where I was really close to burnout and had a ton of commitments on the calendar, was traveling a lot, and just was trying not to kind of get lost in the melee of what was going on in that time period. And so I just picked one for that time period, which was day by day. And where is ease trying to find me? EASE. So looking for ease in that time period. And so I don't need day by day typically, but for that time period, it was like, I need to shrink my focus just to here and take it in this package size instead of the bigger one.
Yeah. What are
And
you?
one more strategy for it for this year.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So this year it's a one word mantra. And it was one that I actually got one of my strategies for it is sometimes I like my glitter pens. And so I'll use glitter pens in my journal and I'll write down like, what are all the things that I would like this year to be about? And so, abundance and hope and joy and whatever. And so one of the ones I've been working on is receiving. And so I wrote receive in my journal page, and I'll kind of look at all of those and then I'll just meditate a little bit and see which one kind of like seems to float to the top or like pops onto that little like movie screen in my head while I'm meditating. So this year's mantra is just one word, and it's receive.
Receive. Ooh, I love that. And I know that that's something a lot of my people on my list are like me, like you, helpers, healers, coaches, artists, creatives, and we tend to really be good at having these huge hearts and giving and giving and giving, but like that skill of receiving is a good one. I was thinking like one of my intentions when I was reading your book, I was thinking about how I want to make more art in 2023. And I was thinking my mantra could be I'm in a gentle flow, but I like how yours, I like that be in a gentle flow. It's more like a command, like that will make me think, how can I be in a gentle flow? Because I feel like that will help me relax because I tend to overwork, but being in a gentle flow would not be that. So
Flow gently. Like
flow gently. Yes, maybe that's it. Like just a simple word that puts me at ease when I think about it. And you mentioned that in the book, like be sure the mantra that you choose kind of feels, it kind of lights something inside of you. When you read it, you kind of feel something.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's a really big part of it. So even when receive came up, and my first thought was, ooh, that feels decadent and luxurious. And then I also went, holy cow, that means I'm gonna have to also receive stuff I don't want. Maybe I want a different word. Like
yeah, the fear comes up.
push back against it. But it is an area, again, back to being intentional, that is an area that you mentioned, like I want to work on that because I'm great at giving.
Mhm.
And yet that is where I also find burnout and depletion and challenges. And all of a sudden, the spilled cup of orange juice at breakfast is like a big deal instead of just a cup of spilled orange juice. So I do like to connect it one to something that's action oriented, which is why I would say like flow gently. There's
Yeah,
like
a verb.
an embodiment of it. And also something that feels good, but maybe pushes the boundaries a little bit more in a way that I really want to expand, not in a way that I feel like I should or I need to, but a way that feels really authentic and true.
I love that. I want to get back to talking about your awesome book, awesome on your own terms. Your book is really an example of the successful taking of a body of work that you already have. This sort of you started it by first of all, you developed your own as a consultant. You were teaching people these things. Then you developed into a course, and then you were like, no, now I want this to be a book. And what I love about your book is like it's such a conversational tone and such a warm, like you feel like you're sitting with you in this friendly, like you feel like you're having this one-on-one conversation, which is so awesome. For the people who are out there who want to write a book or want to take their, a body of work that they have already developed, like how did you do that? What was your process for taking these courses that you had created and this advice you had created and turning it into an actual book?
So the first couple of strategies that had been the webinars, I actually had them transcribed and
Okay.
started there. And that I don't even remember where I learned that, but early on I think when I was still in local government full time and was like, someday, far in the future when I retire, and I was talking to somebody who facilitated, and she said, here's the thing is anything you produce is something you can build upon for the next. So the social media post becomes the blog post, becomes the keynote address, becomes the course, becomes the chapter in the book. And she had kind of planted that seed, and I thought it was genius. So I started there, tons of editing from that.
Yeah.
And honestly, COVID hit. So the original I think it was 8 or 9 strategies were written pre-COVID. And I ended up shelving the whole thing once the pandemic started, because while some people had this experience of cocooning and being able to create and have this space, that is not what that looked like in my world. And so I pushed pause on it, and I'm glad I did, because the last 3 strategies didn't exist prior to that. So those came in, and kind of the process for it was, I said, these are great. What else would I want people to know based on kind of like what I've seen in my own evolution? And that was the stop shoulding is where that one came in, because that was really big. And ditching the doubt as well. So that was another one that came in a little bit later than, I don't even remember the other one. Oh, radical presence. So radical presence was kind of a piece there, but that was one that needed to kind of exist separately. And for those, because this was more of one of those like teachy kind of books, it's like you take it, you learn something, there's activity, there's like journaling prompts, that sort of thing. It was much easier to like bullet point it out, almost like an outline. here's the lesson. What are the ways I could teach the lesson? Every chapter has strategies in it. And then what are the journal prompts that would get somebody there? So there was kind of a pre-fit sort of outline. And that comes just based on how I teach. So
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't do anybody any good to only learn a concept. And I've sat through a lot of those workshops or been to a lot of those keynotes where I was like, wow, that was really inspiring. How the heck am I ever going to put that into practice? And so,
Totally.
yeah, so that was kind of the idea. So it kind of had like a little bit of a outline flavor to it, which made it a little simpler.
For those of you who are watching, so if you've got a start on a book and you shelved it, Nicole is living truth that you can shelve it for a year. I've seen people shelve it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then come back to it. That sometimes it's because you needed that extra time to learn, or you needed another plot twist. If you're writing memoir, maybe you needed something to kind of make the rest of the book make sense. So yeah. Now that you've published Awesome on Your Own Terms, you have started working on a fictional book. And can you talk just a couple things? Well, just talking about how it's different to work on fiction as a writer. And also just like, I know you work full time. I know you have a little one at home and your husband works full time too. Like, how do you find time to write? How do you make the time to finish up a book and to work? I know you've got substantial progress on your novel.
Yeah. So first of all, writing the fiction novel is like, I don't even know what would be more extensive than 180 degrees in the other direction, but it's like whatever that is times a million. Um, Totally different process, does not lend itself to what worked for the first one was well, the transcription thing was super helpful because it was packaged pieces I could teach. The other part was because it was in sort of that outline format, it was much easier to write in small chunks, because I could pop in and just come up with one journal question or outline a strategy that I had played with that day or bumped into with a coaching client. The fiction novel needs a lot of space and wants time in larger chunks. So the approach with the first one, I kind of fit it in around my life. So, oh, I have 2 hours this afternoon that are meeting free, or that thing got canceled. I'm going to pop over and do a little bit of that. Or I'm struggling with this strategy, so let me come up with an online 30-minute workshop to help me think it through, or try it in a coaching group. The novel is just a completely different experience where I'm fitting my life around the novel now. And that sounds great. And that probably conjures images of like cozy blankets and, writing by the fireside. And that's totally not what it looks like. What it looks like is me getting up at 4:30 in the morning so I can have 2 hours of time before my little one wakes up and I've got to get her ready for school. Or
And going to bed early. If you're going to get up at 4:30, I would say like, yeah, that means you're going to bed at 8 because nobody can get by on less sleep.
Yeah, and like not sacrificing sleep, but then shifting some of those other things. So the other week I had to travel for work, and normally I, try to minimize the time gone. And I booked an extra 6 hours on either end of the trip. So I was still home in the evening, but I had like an extra 6 hours while I was there, and sat at a coffee shop and put some time in on the novel. So um, that has required a lot of support. And, I learned it first in the Let's Fly writing group that you and Inger Kenobi do, of the power of community, not just of other writers, but also enlisting people in my sphere for like, hey, partner, I need to get up and write on Saturday morning. So I'm going to go to bed early Friday night, and then I'm going to be out the door before the kiddo wakes up. Can you take her until noon so I can be at the coffee shop?
Yeah.
And I mean, working with you, you've mentored me through the fiction novel as well, and also through the original one, which is how I even got it done at all, was through the writing group. Which I think is really, when you look at, there's this perception that if you're not busy elsewhere, it's easier to write. And I would probably argue that point, because I'm like stupid busy sometimes, and I'm finding ways to fit it in, but it really all comes down to intentionality, and community. Like what is around you that you can make work so that this kind of fits in a little bit differently. So yeah, this one's the novel is quite the adventure, and I was like, I wrote this book and now I have the formula down. This is how it's going to work. And then it was like, just kidding, doesn't work that way. Not at all.
But there is sort of like, even if your next book, what's cool is once you've published one book, it's kind of like you go, ooh, like I could publish another book. And if I was going to, what would I write? I think that's the neat part of it. And I see the joy that is coming with your writing your novel. There's something about that is just like, I can't wait to read it. What, I always like to just ask, well, two things. I want to ask, what's the last beastie that you saw that, like, I don't know, gave you a message or left some impression on you or inspired you in some way?
Oh, Sarah. So yesterday,
Yeah.
January 2nd, I meditated. I did a journey to find my kind of like beastie for the year for 2023.
Awesome.
And I had just had like a guided meditation experience the day before where horses had figured really prominently. And I was like, ooh, horse, like I like this. I like the energy, the whole thing. And what I got instead was a giant black snake. And I was like, oh, it's going to be one of those years. Like,
Oh no.
transformation, shedding the skin, all of it. And it's funny, you start to see like how life is kind of weaving things together, where awesome on your own terms, even down to the title had challenged me, where the original title was Be Intentional, Stop Shoulding and Start Succeeding. And during that shelving period where I kind of put it on pause and was doing my own personal growth and survival mechanism through the pandemic, the title got taken. And I didn't realize it even until like almost the very end when we were ready. And the gal that was helping me with the cover was like, yeah, you can't call it that. I was like, what? I just checked a couple of months ago. Where there's this kind of like shedding of not just the shoulds, not just the doubt, but what I thought this would look like.
Yeah.
My life, my business, writing a book, not writing a book, just kind of all of it. And it felt very untethering at first. And it's also like, wow, there's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of freedom in that. So snake as a beastie for me coming into this next year really felt appropriate, and also kind of like, oh, here we go. Like, all right,
Here's adventure.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was in my big life transition about same like 12 years ago. We were kind of in tandem going through this, but this black mamba snake showed up, and I know you know that story, but and I remember it finally gave me relief when somebody explained to me that black, like a snake, represents kundalini, which is this energy that we all possess at the base of our spine, in all these ancient wisdom traditions of India talk about, and that it's, rising. So I'm just going to predict that you are just, yeah, you're shedding your skin and you're going to rise. You're going to rise even higher. And I'm just absolutely just adore you. And I'm so excited. I'm kind of excited that the book is called Awesome on Your Own Terms, because I love the title. I think it's fantastic. So you guys, if you're wanting to make 2023 your year to transform your personal life and your professional life too, Nicole's book will walk you through. Grab a pencil and paper or a pen in your favorite journal and walk yourself through it, and do it with a group, even better, because Nicole and I know when you do this things with other people, it's like, it's so much more fun for one thing, but it's also just, it's empowering because you realize you're not alone, and it's a good thing. So thank you so much, Nicole, for being here. And I will pop Nicole's all her information if you want to work with her or hire her to come and do a presentation at your company. She's a phenomenal. So bye, Nicole. Many blessings for you in 2023.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.